The Chicago Blackhawks return to action tonight, taking on the Philadelphia Flyers. And on today's episode, I'll get into a preview of the matchup, plus an update on Cole Guttman's scorching hot streak with the Rockford IceHogs. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Can go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2. And make sure to also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. So that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And just a quick reminder to everyone watching this on YouTube right now, like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff is 100% free and really does help me in growing the show. If you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, do me a favor, please make sure you're downloading all of those latest episodes. Even if you're someone who regularly is watching on YouTube, that would help me out tremendously. Rate and review the podcast as well if you like what you're listening to on a daily basis. And I also got to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Sign up today and visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get $200 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's weekend is off to a good start thus far. And back in action tonight are our Chicago Blackhawks as they continue their road trip and head from Ottawa to Philadelphia for a meaningful game against the Flyers. Of course, not very meaningful for our Blackhawks, but a very meaningful game for the team that they are facing, as the Flyers are currently in the midst of an intense playoff battle out east. They currently sit in the 3 seed in the Metropolitan Division with 82 points, but they're just 1 point ahead of Washington for the final playoff spot, and 5 points ahead of the New York Islanders as well, who are in the Metro Division, and 3 points ahead of the Detroit Red Wings. So the Flyers are trying to hold on for dear life. I outlined all the playoff races a couple of weeks ago, and I did project the Flyers to hang on to one of the final wild card spots, but the Blackhawks have an opportunity to come into this building and play a little bit of spoiler here, like they did to the Pittsburgh Penguins late last season. They're having the same opportunity here tonight against the Flyers. However, for whatever reasons, aside from the 2010 Stanley Cup final, this has been a rather impossible building for the Blackhawks to play in. Going back to 1996, the Hawks have just won one regular season game in Philadelphia. So for whatever reasons, it's been tough for them in this building, but man, would it be fun to go and pour a little bit of vinegar on those always salty Philadelphia Flyers fans. But this is the second and final meeting between these two teams here in the regular season. The last time they faced came back on February 21st at the United Center. Flyers were able to cruise to a 3-1 win, but they have been a little bit shaky here down the stretch. They're just 3-5-2 over their last 8 games. So, hey, maybe the Blackhawks can take advantage of a team that's a little bit tight, just trying to hold on to their butts for dear life, and can go and sneak out a road W here this evening, which would only be their 7th of the entire season. But as far as what we could see out of the Blackhawks projected lineup, it has to be basically the same skaters that they're going with, aside from Nikita Zaitsev. He is going to be out of the lineup here this evening, meaning Jared Tenorti, the only other defenseman on the active roster, is going to be jumping in. But with Reese Johnson still in concussion protocol, Colin Blackwell not able to come back from his upper body injury yet, Blackhawks are stuck with the same 12 forwards. Personally, though, if I were Luke Richardson, I'd be willing to mix up the forward lines a little bit. First, I'd probably put Nick Foligno back on that top line with Connor Bedard and Philip Kurashev. I know Ryan Donato has been excellent this month. He's been a great energy and glue guy, but the Hawks just need that top line to be cooking offensively, realistically, to win games. And I think Nick Foligno on the left wing with Bedard and Kurashev gives them their best opportunity of doing that. So that would personally be the change that I would make. And then you just bump down Ryan Donato a line to play with Tyler Johnson and Taylor Radish. I still don't love Mackenzie Entwistle playing on the left wing with Andreas Athanasiou and Lucas Reichel. I think a really dynamic, more offensive-minded player would do them some favors, but it's tough right now. I don't know if you put Donato on that line and play Entwistle with Johnson and Radish. I actually would probably lean that way and have Donato hopefully bring that energy to Lucas Reichel and Andreas Athanasiou's line to get them going. But you're also not going to be switching Slaggert, Dickinson, and Anderson, I don't think. So those are really the only options. You can kind of move things around with the left wingers. That's the way that I would do it. I would have Foligno with Bedard and Kurashev, Entwistle with Johnson and Radish, and then Donato with Athanasiou and Reichel. We'll see if Luke Richardson winds up thinking the same way that I do when the Hawks hit the ice for pregame warmups. And then on the defensive side of things, as I mentioned, Nikita Zaitsev is not going to be able to go tonight, so Alex Vlasic and Seth Jones, they'll remain as the top pairing. Kevin Korchinski and Jacob Megna will remain as the second, and then I expect Wyatt Kaiser to move on over to his offside, which he's done throughout the course of the season, both in the NHL and the AHL. Tough part for him, though, is he's going to have to be doing that while playing alongside the pylon, the traffic cone that is known as Jared Tenorti, who has really struggled this year and has not had the same impact that he did late last season to earn himself a one-year extension. And then Arvid Soderblom is going to be in net for the Blackhawks tonight. The double whammy, the Hawks on the road and Soderblom in net. Probably doesn't look good for their winning chances in this one, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that Soderblom can have a good performance and help this Blackhawks team play spoiler. He really needs it, needs to finish this year on a high note. It's been such a struggle for him, but I think that kind of also tells you just how good Peter Mrazek has been. Like, it's not an ideal situation for Arvid Soderblom to be in his first full NHL campaign with a less than ideal defense. The Blackhawks stink as a whole. They really don't often give him much run support. It basically, for the Blackhawks to win this year, it takes a goaltender standing on their head, and Arvid Soderblom just hasn't been able to do that throughout the course of a 60-minute game. It feels like he always has one hiccup along the way. Peter Mrazek has really been able to prevent that. So hopefully Soderblom can have a really good performance tonight. Lord knows he needs it, and it would make things a lot easier for us Blackhawks fans who are actually still tuning into this team despite all their struggles with 9 games left to go on the schedule. All right, there is my preview of tonight's matchup against the Flyers in Philadelphia. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll be talking about a much more fun topic of conversation, which is Cole Guttman's scorching hot streak currently going on with the Rockford IceHogs. But first, I need to talk to you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or else you'll get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. With all the parts you need at the prices you actually want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and to bring home that win. Again, that's ebaymotors.com. The Chicago Blackhawks are back in action tonight, taking on the Philadelphia Flyers with a 6 p.m. Central Time puck drop. It's the second and final meeting between these two teams here in the regular season, and you can catch all of the Blackhawks hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. All you have to do is just search Blackhawks. All right, segment 2. A lot of what I'm discussing here on the show late in the season has to do with Blackhawks prospects, since that's the most fun thing to be covering right now and arguably the most important. And I don't know if this guy is still considered a prospect at this point in time. Quite honestly, I don't think he is because of his age. But Cole Guttman, man, has been on an absolute tear for the Rockford IceHogs in these last few weeks and has been an instrumental part of them going on this super hot run, playing their best hockey of the season at the most meaningful time. They picked up another 5-1 win last night and will be back in action here this evening, taking on the Chicago Wolves out in Rosemont. My dad is actually going to be in attendance for this one at Rosemont. Or at Allstate Arena in Rosemont, excuse me. But like I said, Cole Guttman has been cooking for the IceHogs lately. He's now up to over a point per game on the season, 15 goals and 21 assists for 36 points in 35 games. And he's got 19 points over his last 10. 7 of those have been multi-point performances. Cole Guttman has just kind of taken his game to another level. And we saw this a little bit down in Rockford last year after he got his feet settled, got comfortable down there in the first half of the season. He really started stringing together solid performance after solid performance. And that's what led to the Blackhawks calling him up in the second half, him kind of bursting onto the scene and unfortunately not being able to finish off the season on a high note because he suffered a shoulder injury that cut his campaign short. But it felt like it was going to be a little bit of a battle for Cole Guttman to make the Blackhawks opening night lineup. I expected him to. He got an opportunity right out of the gate, but didn't really have the best start, wasn't really all that productive, and wasn't as impactful as he was late in the season the year prior, but now it feels like he's starting to really get things going. He's taking over games for the IceHogs, and he's been such an important offensive piece because obviously the Hogs have been without Luke Philp for a majority of this season. He's been a focal point for them, and they've just been a little bit more offensively challenged this year than they were in years past. Cole Guttman has filled that void rather nicely. I don't think he's going to get recalled by the Blackhawks before the end of the season. I think they want to leave him down in Rockford and keep playing meaningful hockey down there while being kind of their head guy at this point in time. But it sets him up nicely going into this offseason as an RFA. I fully expect the Blackhawks to bring him back, but he's going to have a good training camp to make this team out of camp, because I do think the Blackhawks are going to be making some additions to their forward group. They're obviously, knock on wood, going to be healthier, but this is great to see out of Cole Guttman, and hopefully this can kind of get him trending in that right direction to be the type of player he was at the end of last season for the Blackhawks at the NHL level. We've also seen some great things out of the Blackhawks young defensemen playing for Rockford this season. I saw this on X the other day, but both Wyatt Kaiser and Ethan Del Mastro rank among the top 20 in AHL game score per 60 minutes for defensemen under 23 years of age. Wyatt Kaiser comes in at number 14. Ethan Del Mastro comes in at number 17. And Kaiser is going to turn 22 here this summer in July, but Ethan Del Mastro just turned 21 back in January. And for him to have a top 20 game score per 60 minutes for under 23-year-old defenseman in the AHL when he was 20 for the majority of his first pro campaign, really, really impressive stuff. I am super stoked about Ethan Del Mastro. He's been a top pairing guy for Rockford all season long on the left side, on his off wing, which I think is really impressive as well, and showing the ability to play on the other side, which I think is going to be intriguing for the Hawks with the sheer number of left-handed defensemen that they have in their system. Super great signs that their young defensemen have been developing properly down in Rockford. That's everything you want to see. And I think it's no surprise that Kaiser has been looking more comfortable in the NHL since being recalled after having that solid 3-month stint down with the IceHogs. But I mentioned the IceHogs, not only is Guttman on a hot streak, the IceHogs have been racking up wins here as of late. They've now won 15 of their last 19 games dating back to February 10th. That has them good for third in the Central Division standings at this point in time, which would allow them to miss out on the best of 3 play-in game for the first time. They've been involved in that each of the last 2 years. They're still 6 points back of the Grand Rapids Griffins for the second spot in the Central Division, but I'll tell you what, that gap has narrowed much more than I anticipated. I really thought the 3 spot was going to be it for the IceHogs, but they have their sights set on chasing down the Grand Rapids Griffins, and they still have 3 meetings against them before the end of the regular season. So they could pick up some key wins there. Shoot, I'm not going to count out the IceHogs finishing off with the number 2 seed in the Central Division. They're currently 5 points ahead of the Texas Stars for that 3 spot. The Stars have 64 points through 63 games, while the Hogs have 69 points through 61 games. So they have a 2-game advantage as well. It's really been a nice stretch of hockey here out of the IceHogs. That's what you want to see this late in the season, and hopefully they can keep that momentum going when the Calder Cup playoffs start here in just a couple of weeks. Only 11 games left on the schedule for the Rockford IceHogs this season. All right, there is a quick update on the Rockford IceHogs and Cole Guttman's scorching hot streak in the AHL. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I still have to get into some other updates on Blackhawks prospects in the OHL. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, please make sure to smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. That way, you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today has got you covered with all the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, segment 3, getting into some other Blackhawks updates on their prospects. Most importantly, Nick Lardis is back, baby. The Hawks' 3rd-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft missed the final 2 months of the OHL regular season, unfortunately, due to a wrist injury. There were talks that he was going to be able to come back for game 1 of their playoff series from that wrist injury, and that was the case yesterday. And boy, was it a heck of a return for Nick Lardis, tallying 2 goals and adding an assist in Brantford's Game 1 victory over Ottawa. Heck of a return from Nick Lardis, picking up right where he left off. In 50 games during the regular season, he had 29 goals and 21 assists. 50 points in 37 games, 29 goals, 21 assists. The kid knows how to find the back of the net with frequency. And he, like I said, picked up right where he left off. Hopefully it'll be a long and successful playoff run here for Nick Lardis. But I do want to be sure to mention that Scott Powers, in his article that he came out with a couple of days ago, talking about a slew of news on several Blackhawks prospects, he did reiterate that Nick Lardis is expected to spend another season in the OHL, which I think is actually the right call for him because he missed a majority of this season. You know he's going to be scoring more goals than he has already the last 2 years since being acquired by the Bulldogs. I think he has the opportunity to put up really big numbers next year, and that will give him sky-high confidence going into the professional scene. But I do think he needs another year of development in the OHL to get a little bit stronger. He's going to have to add weight to that frame of his. That's really the one knock on him is he's a small kid, and what does he provide other than the goal-scoring abilities? I think next year remaining in the OHL will give him a really good opportunity to kind of round out his game before jumping to the pro level. Another Blackhawks prospect in the OHL who is anticipated to remain there for another season as well is Martin Misiak, who oddly enough didn't play for the Erie Otters in game 1 of their series against Kitchener, which they ended up losing 6-3. I haven't seen any updates on Misiak in terms of whether or not that was because of an injury or an illness or if it was a coach's decision. I would probably expect it isn't that, because Misiak finished the regular season on a really high note and has been a top 6 forward for this team basically all year long. So we'll see if he'll be able to get back in the Otters lineup for game 2, but he also is expected to remain in the OHL for another campaign. Even though he is a little bit older of a prospect, he's already going to turn 20 years old in September, and for being part of the 2023 NHL draft, he's basically as old as some of the guys in the draft the year prior, like a Nolan Allen or an Ethan Del Mastro and those types of guys. But I do think it's not a terrible idea to let Martin Misiak go and be maybe a top line guy for the Erie Otters. I think rounding out his offensive playmaking a little bit before hitting the next level will do him some favors, and also just getting a little bit stronger, because I think his defensive presence is really what's going to be a sharp attribute for him at the NHL level. But also, in Scott Powers' article, he mentioned that Paul Ludwinski, Gavin Hayes, and Samuel Savoie all could be joining the Rockford IceHogs whenever their junior season comes to an end. And then I think it would only make sense for them to be making the full-time leap to professional hockey. Ludwinski, Savoie, Gavin Hayes, all in Rockford next year, along with, maybe Wyatt Kaiser again, maybe Ethan Del Mastro, Nolan Allen, Drew Comesso, maybe Frank Nazar. Like, there are going to be a lot of intriguing pieces down in Rockford next year, and I think this is just the next step for those guys that I just mentioned, to put them along the same path that we saw Ethan Del Mastro go on this year, Nolan Allen, both of those guys. Nolan Allen is actually still 20 years old. He's going to be turning 21 in April next month. And Ethan Del Mastro, like I said earlier, turned 21 back in January. So I think it's just time that the Blackhawks want to get their hands on this next group of prospects like Ludwinski, Gavin Hayes, Samuel Savoie. I think they want to get their hands on them down in Rockford and start to have them developing at the professional scene. And according to Powers, Ryan Green also has an opportunity to make the leap to the professional scene after the conclusion of his sophomore campaign. I actually kind of expected him to go back to Boston University for his junior season and be the top line center there, because Macklin Celebrini is certainly going to be leaving. I think that would be a really good opportunity for Ryan Green. But after what he showed during his sophomore year, being a point per game player, the goal scoring took an uptick. He's a really sound two-way player, has the future of a center iceman in the NHL, got some good size to him, and he's already going to turn 21 in October. So if the Blackhawks wait another year, he won't be 22 years old until they get their hands on him. I wouldn't be surprised to see, was going to be surprised, but after hearing kind of Scott Powers outline this and the path that a lot of Blackhawks prospects have been on, would not be surprised to see Ryan Green leave Boston University whenever his season comes to an end also. But an enticing time to be keeping up with all of these Blackhawks prospects. They seem to be not that far away from joining Rockford and jumping to the professional scene. Going to be really fun to keep up with over these next couple of weeks. And as always, I'll be covering all of the latest news on that right here on Locked On Blackhawks. All right. I think that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2. And make sure to also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey as well. Go and follow the show's page on X too at capital L, capital O, _Blackhawks, closing in on 1,700 followers there. So if you don't already, go and hit that follow button. And as always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Like I said, I'll catch you all next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.